Hello, folks. This is Jeff Davis with the legendary Jeff Davis Show from Central Texas, USA. And I love Mike Hanson Archives. Peace out, baby.
Camisea, that's what this...
Hi, I'm Joyce Riley. You're watching the Jeff Davis Show, and for more information on what's happening with the Gulf War illness, stay tuned to the Jeff Davis Show.
I had a dream the other night that, well, I didn't understand. A figure walked in through the mist with a flintlock in his hand. His clothes were torn and dirty as he stood there by my bed. He took off his three-cornered hat, and speaking low to me, he said, "We fought a revolution to secure our liberty."
We are back. Now, just briefly here before we get to our guest, we have a hot show for you today.
Oh.
In 1990, I was one of the first ones to come out in Austin, Texas publicly against Desert Storm. Desert Storm.
Fraud. Storm fraud.
Now with us today, we have two illustrious guests. One is a former KVET radio host who's got a new job on the radio, and she's a dear friend of ours, Joyce Isaacs. And also in the studio, one of the leaders, if not the leader, in fighting for the Gulf War illness business, Miss Joyce Riley.
A true hero and patriot. She really is.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Okay, I want to just open it up then. Which one of y'all wants to go first?
Well, let Joyce.
Go ahead, Joyce.
She's an Army officer,
You're
or
from
Air
Hu-
Force,
you're
and a
from
nurse.
Houston,
Air
right?
Force,
That's correct.
yeah.
Yes, I'm from Houston. I want to say that I had the pleasure of being here in Austin because of some Gulf War veterans and some very concerned people here. Wanted to have a meeting to show the evidence because, you know, we've been talking about this on the radio for a long time. In fact, Carl's Wigglesworth show was kind enough to have us on the air the other day also, and Keith Perry on his micro-broadcasting station. And I want to say that I don't want anyone to believe me just because I say this. Don't believe me just because you're hearing it on the radio or you see something on TV, because that's the problem we're into right now with the Pentagon and the information they're putting out. So we came to Austin to put on the information, to show the evidence, which we did last night at the American Legion. And by doing that, we showed evidence of whether or not this Gulf War illness is real. Is it as serious as everybody says? And has the U.S. government known this information since 1991 and failed to tell the American public? So we left it open for the public to see. We left it open for the public to decide in their own minds, is this true or not? Because if people understand what is happening right now, if I am correct in what I am saying, that means we have a Pentagon right now that has lied to the American people, lied to our military, allowed them to get sick, allowed them to die, and allowed them to transfer this disease to other people.
Now, wait a minute, Joyce. It's easy to believe you because you were there, weren't you?
Well, I wasn't in the theater of operations, and this is why this is part of my story. I did not go to Desert Storm. I served.
But you found out about. You were one of the pioneers that found out about this.
Oh, I got sick. That'll teach you real quick. You got a problem.
Really quick.
That's right. And what happened was, as a flight nurse in the Air Force Reserve, I volunteered to go back at Kelly Air Force Base in the 32nd AES to participate in Operation Desert Storm. I was supposed to go to Saudi Arabia the week of the ceasefire, so I did not go. But as a result of that, what I did at that point was I made sure
Can
that...
I interrupt you just a minute, Joyce? Yeah, either that or just put up a slate for a minute. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry to interrupt you all like this.
Stay tuned right here for more classics on this channel here, Hanson Archives. But to fund this station, I'm offering, if you send us $25, we'll send you a signed copy of Bohemian Grove Cult of Conspiracy. It was forwarded by Tex Mars that just recently passed away. Also, Alex Jones has a chapter in here. And you know that's good. There's us in our younger days. But on the address that you see, send us $25 and we will send you a signed copy, or give us a call at 830-672-3089 and you can put it on a credit card. We'll send it right out. But that's what we need to help fund this channel, folks. So help us get all the classics uploaded to YouTube. We got hundreds and hundreds of old Alex Jones and Jeff Davis and a bunch of other Patriots that we need to upload. About 25-year-old tapes.
There we go. That's better.
Magic of TV.
Yeah.
I think your audience probably understands.
Live television.
And so what I did was, as a flight nurse and volunteered to go back to Desert Storm, was I volunteered to go to Kelly Air Force Base. I did not go to the theater of operations because of the ceasefire, but I did fly around in a C-130 from Alaska to Cuba doing missions and trying to serve my country. And I want to say that to every veteran out there and to every person listening to this program, you joined the military for the right reasons. And I am a very pro-America person, pro-military. I am not anti-American, I am not anti-military, and I want that clearly understood here. That I support this form of government, and I would have died for it, and I still would die for it. But we have now a credibility problem with our Pentagon that is more serious than anything that I can imagine. And the allegations that I am making against the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, the CIA, and the Veterans Administration is more serious than anything that anyone is saying anywhere in this country.
What exactly is it? For people who haven't heard what exactly is it that you kind of stumbled onto this?
Well, I became ill. I've served as a flight nurse from January to July of 1991. From July to December, I became ill and was hospitalized in December of 1991 at St. Luke's Hospital in Houston. And as a result of that, I was diagnosed with some type of unknown central nervous system disorder, similar to multiple sclerosis, which many, many Gulf War veterans have. This is not just me.
Scares me to
Many
death.
Gulf War veterans have MS. So I was diagnosed with this, and it took me over the next year to get better, and finally I started to recuperate, and I'm okay today. But I was treated early on, and the whole entire reason that I am doing what I am doing is because there are those that are dying right now. There are family members that are sick as a result of this disease, and I want it stopped. I want the Pentagon to come forward with the truth. I want the American people to understand there is a Gulf War illness.
But
There's a
Joyce,
Gulf
that's
War
the
illness
most
that's
frightening
real.
thing. You never were in the Gulf War theater, you say.
That's right.
But you got it from somewhere.
Yes.
And other family members of veterans have gotten it. This makes me cold when I think of it, because it's just, is it airborne? I mean, you know what? Do we have any idea?
Okay, let me give this part as my opinion, and very little of what I say is opinion because I use evidence, I use documents to prove what I'm saying. So that the people listening will not think that this is just my opinion. Let me preface it by saying, first of all, I'm not a physician and I'm not giving medical advice tonight. This is based on documents. Everything that I say to you is based on documents unless I tell you differently. Now, this is my opinion. I believe 75% of the illness that Gulf War veterans are experiencing is due to the vaccinations that we received. Vaccinations that our own country gave us that were experimental, that were not necessarily to protect us during wartime, that had ulterior motives. 25% of the disease, I believe, is due to biological, chemical, and nuclear exposures. Now, we have people that obviously suffered from chemical exposures at Camisea and many other areas that were detonated over there. We know there were nuclear plants that were blown up in Iraq. We know that there were chemical and biological munitions areas that were blown up, and we know that the exposure from that has affected our troops. Now, my concern, though, and I want to separate right now biological from chemical. Chemical may be sarin gas or taban gas. Chemical may be oil well fires, exposure to oil well fires, environmental exposures. But the concern I have is not those three, because you don't bring home an oil well fire problem after the war and give it to your family.
Right.
Biological is a whole different arena, and biological is the exposure to viral, rickettsial, bacteriological, or fungal agents that can be spread to other people. So we know that our troops were somehow exposed to a biological agent. Now, did our country do it? Did Iraq do it? I don't know that we're going to know the full answer to that, but I know that I was nowhere over there.
Right. Okay.
And your point is well made. So right after the war, when I became so ill with a disease that they said they'd never seen before and symptoms they'd never seen before, I wanted to know where it came from, and I called Veterans Administration, I called the DOD, and of course my response from them was, there's nothing wrong with you, nobody's sick, everybody's fine, thank you very much, don't bother to call us back. That's when I knew we had a problem, because, you know, epidemiologically, if a nurse calls you, and by the way, I've been a nurse for 25 years, and let me just establish who I am and what I've done before this. I just didn't come out from under a rock in 1993 and start yelling conspiracy, Gulf War. I have been a director of nursing for 2 hospitals in San Antonio, for a long-term care facility. I've taught nursing courses. I've lectured. I've done a lot of things in the nursing arena for 25 years. I was the most naive person. I mean, I knew there were these 2 houses in Washington. One was called Congress and one was called the Senate. But other than that, I knew very little, literally. I was not involved in anything.
I don't know if you were naive or like a lot of us, you were trusting.
Yes, yes.
Maybe that's a better word. Because
was
you're
I?
sitting next to a veteran. How long were you in the Air Force?
13 years.
See?
United States Air Force. Yeah.
13 years, wow.
I actually, see, I made this, we'll get into maybe a little bit of this later, Joyce, but I kind of disagree with your initial statement that, one of your statements, that, see, I completely distrust this government. I think that most of these wars now are nothing more than international bankers just fattening their wallets.
All right, but did you know that 13 years ago when you joined the military?
No, I didn't.
That's what I'm talking
right,
about.
Right.
Yeah,
but I mean, there has to come to a realization that we were duped. When
That's
we were
right.
there. Right.
And if you'd been talking to me like this, or saying these things in 1989, I would have said, get away from me.
He's just,
I don't want to
he's a
talk to you."
crazy.
That's
Yeah.
right. Because I was the most pro-military person. My father was in the Army Air Corps. My mother was in the Navy. My mother outranked my father, so I always say that I came
That's
from a
great,
dysfunctional,
right?
family.
Dysfunctional military
Yeah,
family.
right. But, and you know, and I say this to let people know, I am not anti-military. I loved it. I mean, going up in a C-130 was the greatest source of satisfaction in being a flight nurse that I could have imagined.
But Joyce, if you didn't love this country and you didn't love the military, then you wouldn't have to be doing what you're doing. You do love this country, and that's why you've got to stand up and because something is terribly wrong.
That's right.
Not only that, we 3 times I raised my hand in a vow to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And I can honestly say, Joyce, I have maintained that vow.
Mm-hmm. That's right, you have. And you know, I never understood what domestic enemies even meant when I took that. I never understood. In fact, with George Bush in 1987, I believe it was, I invited him to come to Houston, sign an organ donor card, and be involved with a big PR for organ transplantation, because I was a national organ donor nurse at that time. And I met George Bush and Barbara Bush, greatest people in the world, I thought, and I had no idea I was getting ready to be poisoned by my country. I had no idea what these people represented. And so as a result of that, and like we were talking about, how did I figure out what was going on with me? What did I have in that was correlating with what the other Gulf War veterans had? The only 2 things we had in common was we received the same vaccinations, and I had exposure to the troops.
And those are the two variables right there.
That's
that was
right.
it.
That's right.
That was your.
So that's all I had to begin with. So I said, I know something happened to me during the Gulf War. I know it. I'm sick. I have this inability to use my legs that was transient. It would come and go. I was trying to work as a heart transplant nurse in Houston at the time. It was very taxing. I worked 16-hour shifts. I was not afraid of work. I could work with anyone, worked with the best of them. And so for them to tell me that, oh, you just don't want to work any longer or something, there was nothing to that.
When you have a passion for your profession.
Sure. But this was a physical thing. And that's the problem we've got right now, is because Gulf War veterans are being labeled as having this mental disorder now if they come forward and say they've got Gulf War illness.
Oh, is that the latest strategy?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, the intimidation is incredible what they are doing. So if you're a Gulf War veteran and you go to the VA hospital, I don't care if you're hemorrhaging, I don't care what's wrong with you. The first thing the VA facility does is give you psychological evaluation if you're a Gulf War veteran, and from 2 to 12 hours worth of testing. Then they will pin some type of PTSD disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, some type of diagnosis that can be related to a psychological disease. so that then they can say, oh, well, he's got a psychological problem. This is not a real illness.
But we had we should have realized that this might happen again because the Vietnam vet wasn't treated very well. And when they kept saying, you know, this is happening to my body, and that's happening to my body, and, you know, we're having children, there's something wrong, and nobody wanted to hear that either, did they?
Well, you're exactly right. And that's why I say I owe every Vietnam veteran an apology. Because when they were coming back from over there and were sick, I was listening to the news media. I was a young buck nurse getting ready to join the Air Force Reserve, and they told me, the media told me, these guys are a bunch of guys who came back with a foot fungus and want to be taken care of for a lifetime.
They're babies. They're just
And I believed
squallish,
it.
yeah.
They're a bunch of gold bricks. And I believed that. I didn't know they had a disease that might kill them. I didn't know they were going to have deformed children later on. And do you know that we have never, ever treated any of the Agent Orange veterans? They've never been treated to this day. They've been given a check for $600 and told to go away and thank you very much.
$600?
The majority of them have been paid less than $1,000. And so we now have, and everybody thinks they've been taken care of because the good media, on behalf of the Pentagon, that, you know, Clinton came out and said, oh, we're going to take care of these veterans. They were not taken care of. And now the wives that are married to Vietnam veterans now have sons that are Gulf War veterans. And we have a Vietnam Veterans Wives group that is just formed for that reason. And the sad part is, those women are in charge of making a quilt now for all of the deaths of Agent Orange and the deaths of Gulf War illness, to which the Pentagon has never, ever addressed the deaths of these people.
Did this not come to, now these are all whitewashes, these so-called investigations, but did this not come to a House investigation?
It did. And there was only one real true investigation. And by the way, the report of that investigation has been taken out of the government printing office. You can't even purchase it any longer. This is 103-900, and it is the United States dual-use exports to Iraq, and it's the Committee Housing, Banking, and the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs.
We're going to go ahead and get a close-up of that. I would hope, yeah.
That's this is a 600-page document that's no longer available from the government printing office. And if I were a Gulf War veteran, I'd be pretty furious to know that I couldn't find out why I was sick. It's in here. It's all in here. This is Senator Don Riegel's committee, in which he did this in 1993 and 1994, came out with his final report, and the report is scathing. It literally calls this a cover-up. It talks about the antibiotics that were effective for Gulf War veterans in 1993. It talks about the violent mental attacks they're having right now in which they're doing violent crimes, Gulf War veterans. It mentions everything. It talks about the company that sold those biological warfare agents to Saddam Hussein, right here in the United States.
I was going to say, you're going to tell us, aren't you, that they came from here?
Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
We created him. Why shouldn't we sell him?
We did. We created him. We created Saddam Hussein. Let me tell you the 4 things that this report says that you've not heard from the United States government. First of all, the summary of this 600-page document is 1, nuclear and biological and chemical agents were used. 2, our troops are not just sick, they are dying. 3, the disease is communicable. And 4, we knowingly exported to Saddam Hussein, with the full knowledge of the Department of Commerce and the CDC, the weapons of mass destruction, the biological warfare agents. Which brings us into the whole thing now as to where we stand with Saddam Hussein, which is another whole story we'll get to in a minute. But I think that's very important to understand what is going on now has a lot to do with what has been covered up over the past 4 or 5 years from the American people, because now it's all going to come out. Their house of cards is going to fall down.
You think so?
I do.
They've kept a pretty good house of cards for a long time.
They sure have. But General Schwarzkopf...
Not just in this, but in everything else.
Yes.
But this is just blatant.
Now. Yes, you do. It is.
It's just blatant.
You know, you've got too many dying veterans right now. And General Schwarzkopf, in 1993, we made a video that has evidence on it, strictly evidence. And in it, we accused General Schwarzkopf of not having told the truth in September of this year before a committee hearing. And all of a sudden, 3 weeks after this video comes out and is on the Art Bell Show, General Schwarzkopf admits on September 15th, 1997, that he did not tell the Senate the truth when he testified in 1997. This is the first big domino to fall.
Get a close-up of that real quick.
This was in September 15th of 1997, USA Today. And I will tell you that this is going to be the beginning. Gulf illness treated cavalierly. And I'll read you a statement from this. The statement is, Gulf War illness in the years following 1991 conflict with Iraq was handled very cavalierly by the Pentagon, says Schwarzkopf. Schwarzkopf told Gannett News Service he regretted not telling senators earlier this year about a chemical weapons case involving an Ohio soldier. It says unpublished battlefront reports showing that Schwarzkopf knew about the soldier in 1991 raised questions about why he told Congress this year he had no knowledge of anyone being exposed to chemical weapons. Then over here, they asked Schwarzkopf why he didn't tell the truth, and he said, I wish I had now. It wasn't a question of it slipping my mind. I should have told the truth. Now, this is the unpublished battlefront report that General Schwarzkopf did not reveal. We've put a copy of it in our documentation package that was in the video. And this is an actual nuclear, biological, and chemical log of General Schwarzkopf. This is an NBC log dated 3 March of 1991. And General Schwarzkopf had to read these documents every single day.
Every day, right.
It came from Central Command, CENTCOM. And General Schwarzkopf had full knowledge of this information. Now, that's what an NBC log looks like. It's been declassified, and they are not available any longer. If you do a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act request, it's not going to look like this. It's going to be redacted. But we have some of the copies, the original ones, and we're making them as fast as we can. But let me just read to you what General Schwarzkopf knew. At 15:15 in the afternoon, that's 3:15, it says, Lieutenant Colonel Wade advised that Colonel Dunn has confirmed that the soldier of the 3rd Armored Division does have blisters characteristic of H. mustard chemical agent. Now, see, the question had been raised, were there any biological or chemical exposures? And he said no, there was none. In fact, the official statement from the Pentagon is, there is no evidence, classified or unclassified, to show that biological or chemical agents were used. And that's an absolute lie. An absolute lie.
Joyce, it's just such a big lie. I mean, it's just so, it's more than a lie, it's betrayal.
Well, it is. It's a betrayal, but it is also a public health hazard, because even if we talk about what happened with the Gulf War veterans over there, and General Schwarzkopf's not telling the truth, that's one thing. But now, look at the innocent people. Austin was a military town during that time. How many military people have now transferred this disease to someone else?
Is that the right number, Joyce?
281?
That's correct.
Okay.
587-5436.
Right, that's
Yeah.
the number that they can contact if they need to get in touch with me, because we don't want anyone left frustrated or without any place to turn to, because this is too serious a
But,
subject.
right, you're saying Austin is a military town, right?
And because of its being a military town, San Antonio being a huge
Right.
military town.
Oh, yes.
I mean, now we're having large numbers of cases of a new disease that nobody ever heard about before 1991, that everybody's taking for granted now, called fibromyalgia. Nobody
That-
ever heard about it before 1991.
No, but, and,
Is that all correct?
is that right? Is that
That's
your
it.
website,
That's our website.
www?
Has the address is fine?
The website is www.gulfwarvets.com, but it's all small letters, not large letters. www.gulfwarvets.com, and our address is Gulf War 3506 Highway 6 South, number 117, Sugarland, Texas, 774-78-4401. The phone number is 281-587-5437. You can leave a number and I can get back to you. And again, the website is
Mike Hanson here,
www.gulfwarvets.com.
and we'll get right back to your classic video here on Hanson Archives, or if you're watching Mike Hanson Archives on YouTube. Just want to remind you, you'll see the address pop up, our phone number. I want to invite you to buy my book here. It's when Alex and I snuck into the Bohemian Grove. The book is called Bohemian Grove, Cult of Conspiracy. If you send $25 to that address, I'll sign it. And what will happen with the money is something good. We're taking all the hundreds and hundreds of VCR tapes, which we used to use in the old days, and transferred them over to computer and putting them up on the internet, which is a very hard job, believe it or not, and very expensive job. So if you get a chance, and Tex Morris just passed away. He's the one that forwarded the book, and he just barely passed away a month or two ago. And there's Alex and I when we were younger. We both looked pretty good there then. It's 25 years later now, but go ahead and if you can, we also, if you want to call that number, we also got a credit card machine. We can charge it if you need to. I know a lot of people don't like to send a money order or a check or anything like that, but we'll get it right back out to you. $25 for the book, and it will go for a good cause. So God bless, and now we're going to get back to your classic video here on YouTube.
Okay, and
God bless.
what were you saying? What is fibromyalgia?
Fibromyalgia.
Okay, because that in the talk show circuit, that's a word that has come into being. That's funny you should say that, because I thought, well, I'm just dumb, right, Jeff? I didn't know that word. But I would say probably in the last 10 months or a year, maybe, that word has started to come up again and again. And so that's it. That explains a lot.
Did you ever hear about fibromyalgia before 1991? Did you, Jeff?
No, I haven't. In fact, I haven't even heard of it before you did.
Well, you're a whole different case, though, Jeff. You're a whole different
You
case.
listen to the radio. Okay.
Okay, how about chronic fatigue syndrome?
Oh, I've got
sometimes
that.
I think I have
we
that.
have that. Yeah.
All right, chronic fatigue is a big disease that you've seen in epidemic proportion since 1991. Now, what we now know is that 62% of the chronic fatigue patients are now positive for the same biological warfare agent the Gulf War veterans have. Now, where does this come from? Why do we have people reporting that they have been doctors and nurses taking care of Gulf War veterans and now they have the disease? And they test positive in their blood for it. So we're not talking people that are just, being biased by what they hear or wanting to play sick or take on the symptoms. We're talking about people that are actually testing positive now. And this blood test, by the way, and maybe I should explain, we have identified a biological warfare agent. It is called Mycoplasma incognitus. It is a biological warfare agent that is not found in nature. We believe it's man-made. The DNA sequences are so rare, it's got to be man-made. It was identified at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston.
Who identified that?
Dr. Garth Nicholson. You've probably had him on your program, haven't you?
I'm baiting her. Yeah, he and his wife. Well, isn't his wife Nancy? Is that her
Dr.
name?
Nancy
She's
Nicholson.
a doctor, but
That's
their
right.
daughter got sick, didn't
That's right.
she? Right. And so you three are probably the big flies in the ointment, because you
We're the
came up
pain
with
in
it.
the backside of the Pentagon right now.
Well, I was going to let you say it, but
plan
I'd
on
be
staying
proud to
there,
be the back.
too.
Yeah, that's it. But you three, and you're all two doctors and a very experienced nurse. And of course, he lost his job. Can I say that on the air?
Sure.
Yeah, he lost his job because he was telling the truth.
That's right. He was a tenured professor for 15 years at the MD Anderson Cancer Center. He and Dr. Nancy Nicholson identified this biological warfare agent. I think it's important to understand why. His daughter was on a Black Hawk helicopter doing deep insertions into Iraq. She comes back with a disease in 1991, and all of a sudden the entire family gets the disease. Now, he was trained to go into a lab and find out why there is a disease.
That's what he does.
Causes it.
That's right. That's what he does.
He's a cell biology professor.
And we better, just kiss the ground he walks on, because
He's a hero.
He is a hero, not only in this, but in many other things in his life, Joyce. He's made our lives better.
He is one of the, probably 60 Minutes told me that they said he's one of the most well-respected cancer researchers in America.
Right. Yes, in this entire country.
Yes.
And this is how he got repaid for telling the truth.
Yeah.
I'm about to cry. It makes me so mad,
I know.
Joyce.
I know.
Well, it just makes me furious.
Have you met him before?
No,
He's
just
an
on the
incredible
phone.
person.
Just on the phone.
He is an incredible person. He wants nothing more than to see Gulf War veterans treated. And so for 3 years, he collected blood samples at MD Anderson Cancer Center and tested them at his own expense. And he told me one time on a Sunday afternoon, he came in, he said, Joyce, I just came in and they've unhooked my freezer again. And his freezer of specimens was left to heat up, and it didn't happen. Then they were able to save the specimens. But then he was later told that if he didn't stop the Gulf War research, that he was essentially out of there. So he did, and he went to California. There are only 2 places in the country that now test for this biological warfare agent, and that is, both of them are in California. One is Dr. Nicholson, and then there's another lab in California. But you don't have very many labs that test for biological warfare agents, because up until 1991, we didn't need it.
Well, and according to a lot of people now, we don't have it anywhere, right?
That's correct.
So
Yeah.
there
In
you
fact,
are.
We should talk about what the official government position is right now. The Pentagon position.
Let me just mention first, folks, if y'all, this is a live program. Do you mind taking some calls later at the end?
Please.
Okay. We've been running tapes down here. This is a live program, so if y'all want to, it's 477 ACTV, folks. 477 ACTV if you want to talk to Joyce Isaacs or Joyce Riley. They'll be visiting with us.
Or Jeff Davis.
Or me, but I'm actually learning from this, because I have to admit I don't know a whole lot about what she's saying, but it is interesting.
And I hope you and I don't need to know very much about it.
right.
That's a very selfish, but I just, it makes me mad. But this is another thing we might bring up. It looks like we're going to get back into it with him sooner or later. And when I just think about things, don't laugh, I used to write farm scripts, anthrax and those things. This man, he has no regard for anything but his way in the world, and we may all, who knows what could happen to us, Joyce. Now, if you're not concerned about veterans, you better start being concerned about yourself.
I want to just make sure I understand. You're basically stating that you believe that through vaccines that our military people were pumped whatever is causing this.
I think the majority of those, especially those that didn't go over there, because there are those that did not go to Saudi Arabia that are just as sick, and those that did go that are sick. And I think the ones that did go probably got a combination of both the chemical and biological
A double
exposures.
whammy, yeah.
Yes, and the vaccines. Now, I myself think that I probably got whatever's relative to the vaccinations. And let me go into the speculative a little bit, because this is not something that I could actually prove to you, although the Washington Times says that they can prove it. And
The Washington Times says that?
yes. And the Washington Times and Insight Magazine printed an article about the sickness and secrecy of the Gulf War illness, and I'll just show here. They printed this, it was by Paul Rodriguez, August 25th of 1997, and he talks about the use of something called squalene. That squalene is being found in the blood of Gulf War veterans now, and to the tune of about 300, a majority of 400 of them
Well, what is
had squalene.
What is
Okay,
it?
squalene is a synthetic adjuvant, a compound that is used only in 2 instances that we know about in the United States right now. So if you have squalene in your blood, that means you've been exposed to one of these 2 things. Number 1, it's an experimental malarial compound that has not been used widely, and the second one is an anti-AIDS vaccine. Now, the thesis of what Washington Times and the British press is saying, as well as Insight Magazine, is that Gulf War veterans were the recipient of anti-AIDS experimental vaccines during the Gulf War.
Without their knowledge.
Without their knowledge. Now, if this is true, I would think that every American would rise to their feet immediately and say, I'm sorry, that's it. You don't do that to our people without their knowledge. Because we're not talking about giving immunizations to people for the sake of protecting them in a battle zone area. You don't need an anti-AIDS vaccine.
And that's right.
The reason they did it was because, as you know, in the military, you get tested mandatorily whether you want to or not, so you're the best guinea pig group in the world.
Yeah, I often wonder what's those shots that we're pumping it with.
That's right, and you
As
don't
I
have any
found
way of
out
knowing.
these things, yeah.
Yeah, and your shot record has a bunch of little squiggly lines on it.
Have you heard the rumors about that the AIDS virus could be a man-made deal? Have you
The
heard?
rumors?
Well,
I've heard the rumors.
Well, that's all. I'll leave it at that.
I've heard more than that, but no rumors about it. But yeah, I think that we need to start
Part of the
looking at.
population control program.
Oh, I
You
think
don't go
there's-
that far, huh? Or maybe you do. I don't know. See, I don't know that much about Joyce.
I'll tell you exactly what I think. I think if you take your military and you put them in a theater of operations and they get exposed to something, I don't care if it's cannon fodder, I don't care what it is, I don't care if it's alien dust, if such a thing exists, I don't care what it is, and you bring those people back here and those people say I'm sick, and you start writing them off as being head cases and you don't treat them when you know a treatment exists, that is intentional. That is criminal intent to allow those people to die. Yes, I'm accusing them of that. Absolutely. Because they know that the antibiotics are effective. I was treated with the antibiotics. That's what Dr. Nicholson is treating.
Wait a minute. In other words, if they were treated with the antibiotic, if our government would be honest about what's going on, Joyce, we could probably help a lot of people.
Oh, we could have saved thousands of lives.
What is it? An antibiotic is it anything that's we might know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And here's my disclaimer. I am not a physician. I'm not practicing medicine, but Dr. Garth Nicholson recommends the antibiotic doxycycline.
Doxycycline.
It's a tetracycline derivative.
I was going to say it's
cheap.
and I think probably you get that for other things your doctor may prescribe. Yes.
But if you're a DoD facility or a VA facility, you are not allowed to give a Gulf War veteran doxycycline. Now, isn't that interesting?
Now, wait a minute. You're not allowed to prescribe those in those two facilities.
They're not allowed to. In fact, I've had many physicians call me from the VA system saying that they get audited, they get reprimanded, and it's just simply not available to Gulf War veterans. Now, the reason being, and I've had them explain this to me. See, first of all, the disease we're talking about here, the mycoplasma, is sensitive to doxycycline. I was treated with it. Hundreds of Gulf War veterans have been treated. But you can't get it at a DoD facility or VA facility, so you have to go to a doctor outside. But most doctors don't know anything about it because the Pentagon tells them there's no Gulf War illness, right? So they're going to say, I'm sorry, you need to go to the VA and get your Prozac and be quiet. That's what they are giving. Over 90% of the Gulf War veterans that have contacted me have been offered Prozac by the Veterans Administration. Now, do we see a problem here? They're saying that 90% of the Gulf War veterans that went to fight the war over there are head cases, that 600,000 of our veterans are head cases? I don't think so.
Right, our veterans that at that time, they were certainly good enough to lay their life on the line for me, weren't they?
That's right, and they were willing to die for this country. That's their only crime. That's the only thing they can be convicted of doing anything wrong. They were willing to die for this country. And now we repay them by placing them on Prozac. And I cannot tell you the problems we're seeing from that. The veterans that are doing acts of violence, the veterans that are committing suicide, it is very, very frightening. And that's the reason I'm on here tonight, and I appreciate you're giving me the opportunity to say this, is if you're a veteran and you're sick, don't give up. Because we're here for you. There are people that are here for you, and don't give up. Do not think your country has abandoned you. Your country doesn't know about this yet, but they're going to know. And I want every veteran to know that there are people everywhere that do care and want to know the truth about this.
And the lady you're looking at right now, you're the one. You're really the hero.
Well,
and I would think that you wonder how many phone calls you've taken. Because you just have always said, call me, call me, call me. I'm here. And your life is at this point, and your husband's too, it revolves around this, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's all we do. That's all we think about. Day and night now we get Gulf War veterans phone calls, especially from the 82nd Airborne, the 101st Airborne, Big Red 1 out of Kansas. They're really sick. They're very sick. 3rd Armored Division, 2nd Armored Division, Fort Bliss, a lot of those people are sick. Fort Bragg is a very sick base. And they're not allowed, if they're still in the military, to talk about it. Now, here's a statistic that's very important, and that is that 90% of the Gulf War veterans that served are already out of the military. So that's including Guard, Reserve, and active duty. 90% are already out. So Colin Powell said there was going to be a downsizing right after the war of 25%. We've seen 90%. The Big Red 1 in Kansas was letting out people to the tune of 350 a day because they knew they were going to be sick. They knew they had these exposures. They knew there were going to be problems because people started getting sick during the Gulf War. So now we've got the problem of what's happened to these people. They're in your city, they're in everybody's city now. And the problem with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia is that this disease affects now the general population. 6 million fibromyalgia patients, 18 million chronic fatigue patients. Where do these come from? Well, we know that mycoplasma has been experimented with by the U.S. government since 1970, late 1970s and 1980s, as a carrier agent for other things. And now we don't know what it's carrying. But we know that about 40% of the people that contact us at the American Gulf War Veterans Association have damage to their immune systems. They're suffering from multiple sclerosis, Guillain-Barré, Lou Gehrig's, scleroderma, lupus, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. Very serious diseases.
Let me just say this, Joyce. Can I? This is just my opinion, my opinion is that we're not going to get very far. Well, I mean, you're obviously doing good work with all this, but I mean, with what you've said here tonight, you know, you're accusing the DOD and Pentagon of cover-ups and all, and I totally agree with all that. But then when you make a statement to the point that these people were over there fighting for this country, that's to me that's kind of defeating the whole purpose for this, because that's not, in my opinion, that's not what this was all about.
Okay, well, let's say that's what we believed we were doing.
Yeah.
That's okay. That needs to be stressed then, because as long as we continue to maintain these lies and throwing out this rhetoric that the other side throws out,
But I
think it's going to be harder to get people to accept this.
But in good faith is what we all are trying to say, isn't it? In good faith, men and women said, "I will go fight," right?
I will serve.
Right.
That's right.
And that's exactly what you were doing.
Sure. And
But do you come to understand now that we were dupes?
absolutely, I know that.
Those wars have nothing to do with protecting the Constitution or defending or protecting the borders of the United States. Or
Absolutely.
Well, that was a 6 o'clock news war.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I think all you have to do is look at what's going on right now with Saddam Hussein. I mean, we're going to go to war with a guy, or we started all this escalation because somebody put a piece of paper over a lens camera and wouldn't let them see in the room what was in the room. I mean, is that a reason to go fight a war, or is that affecting our boundaries?
Not why we're doing it.
Of course
we're
not.
doing it because he's usurping the UN resolution. So we're supposed to send our young 18, 19-year-old people to go fight because he's not
Right.
his airplanes are usurping the UN no-fly zone.
Oh,
That's what we're
no,
supposed
wait.
to be doing now.
No, wait, let me give you some information here. Here's some little-known information. That no-fly zone is not a UN-imposed no-fly zone. Were you aware of that?
Well, that's what the media is telling us, isn't it? That the reason why the weapons inspections, you know, Iraq, a sovereign nation supposedly,
Right.
And they're being forced now by this thug agency called the UN to have their nation violated. Plus, the Iraq is disobeying the UN no-fly zone.
That's not a UN no-fly zone. See, that's what they've made you think.
No, well, that's what
That's
they're
a
telling
U.S. It's a U.S. imposed no-fly zone, and we bought into it. That's why only U.S. planes go over that no-fly zone. No UN flights go over that. So the U-2 flights, the U-2 flights are the UN-imposed area, or the UN-imposed. Those are the UN flights.
Our spy
but you
planes.
See, I was talking
But the point is, neither one of those reasons are worth me sending
absolutely
my son to
not.
go dive.
No way.
Okay.
No way. But I'm just
Never.
saying that we don't even know what's true when it comes to the no-fly zone area. Also, Nazar Hamdoun, who was talking to a friend of mine who wrote the book on Saddam Hussein, and she is not pro-Arab or pro-Israeli, and neither am I. I'm
Right.
just saying
We're just
she happened
here.
to do a biography
Right.
book on him. It's in all the libraries now. But her name is Nita Renfrew, and she was talking to Nazar Hamdoun the other day, who is the UN Iraq ambassador to the UN. Nazar Hamdoun had said two things to say. First of all, people don't realize that is a U.S. imposed no-fly zone, and secondly, he has not been allowed before the UN Security Council. Now ask me or tell me why we would not allow someone to go before the UN Security Council when we are going to exhaust all means of diplomacy. Why is it that we have not allowed Nazar Hamdoun to go before the UN Security Council? I don't understand that either. So there's a lot of information we're not getting. We watch the boob tube and we watch 6 o'clock news, And if it happens on the 6 o'clock news, it's true to most people. And that's why I use the statement, you know, if a tree falls in the forest and Dan Rather doesn't cover it, does it still make a noise?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the way people are. If it's not on the news, it didn't happen.
Good girl. That's good.
But my point is taken by you. And
You are
that is
exactly
that
right.
Neither one of those reasons are worth
No way.
any of us sending our
No way.
18-year-old kids to go die.
Absolutely not. But I mean, I'm saying that even that is a contracted, protracted reasons that don't even exist. I'm thinking that the whole thing is made up to the point where it serves another agenda.
Well,
and
and
none
I-
of those reasons are worth
I
us
keep
going and
telling
fighting.
you, we created Saddam.
What's
Absolutely.
happening with the video?
Uh,
What's happening with the...
oh, I don't. Did you take Dan Rather's name in vain? It's off. Little joke there.
I don't know
He's
what's
up
happening
some.
now.
I don't
I
either.
think, well, for
Something.
some
Our
reason
monitor's down. Okay, we can't
maybe our
tell.
monitor's down, or I don't know what's happening.
Okay, let's go
We're
on.
still on?
Okay, it's all right.
you turn
It's
it
just
over
the
to
monitor. It's the monitor. Okay.
Okay, let me just mention a couple things here, folks. First off, we have these. We're entering into about our 7th month now of these downsizing government seminars, and when are you scheduled to be there, Joyce?
Last Sunday of January.
It's 30th.
Is it
I think.
30th of January?
So, what, 6 weeks from now you're going to be
Correct.
there? Okay, and it's the last Sunday of every month. And Joyce, you commented last week that we may find you out there.
Well, now that I'm ambulatory, unless I get some of the stuff she's talking about, you know, I catch everything, Joyce. If you start, I would thank goodness she's a nurse. No, I'll be there. I've been out long enough. I need to be loose now.
Now, also on the February edition, I believe it's February 22nd, the Jeff Davis Show has managed to get several of the surviving Branch Davidians down here to Austin for the seminar. So that's something to look forward to. And I believe in March we have tentatively, I think we have Tex Mars, a friend of mine, scheduled to be there, and of course the regular host of speakers and whatnot. So that's one thing.
Do you know how lucky you are to have Tex Mars here?
Oh, Tex a great guy. Yeah.
He's
I just
incredible.
did a bunch of shortwave with him.
I mean, I don't think Austin understands how fortunate they are.
Come on, anybody want to come up here? All right, that's it. All right, who wants to lead? Let Gene go. Go ahead. Yes, sir. All right. God bless.